TJ Talks, an insight. TJ Talks, an insight session.
Welcome to TJ Talks. Lovely to have you all here. This is me. I'm the Deputy Editor of Training Journal, and I'm looking forward to another great conversation with you all. This is our insight conversation. We have somebody who is a leader in our industry to talk through their thoughts, their experience of what's going on a particular topic. And I thought this quote really started us off nicely for us today. Learning is not attained by chance. It must be sought for with ardour and attended to with diligence, and that's really what we're going to be focusing on. You've got the chat window you can use anytime, share hyperlinks, share blogs, share articles, you can share your own LinkedIn profiles and more if you want to, and you can use that to chat with each other. You've got the question and answer section at the bottom. If you've got a question for our speaker, pop it in there and I will pose it for you. If you want to join us on Twitter, you can. #TJ Talks. John, who is our editor, will be tweeting, and please get involved. Share your thoughts, share your ideas, share your learning nuggets as well. This is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel, and you can find the link by going to trainingjournal.com. And without further ado, I think it's about time that we got our speaker involved. So let me bring Laura on screen. She's been waiting diligently behind the scenes. So Laura, could you unmute for us, please, and just tell us who are you, and what do you do, and where do we know you from?
Okay, well, I'm Laura Overton, and I guess people will mostly know me from the last 15 years of heading up quite an in-depth longitudinal study into learning success and business impact through my work with Towards Maturity. But probably what people don't know about me is the fact that I've actually been in the industry really passionate about learning innovation, business impact, changing culture for the last 30 years. And in the last 6 months since I left Towards Maturity, I've just been exploring and thinking about some of the real big challenges that we've got. And I think this is definitely one of them.
It certainly is. It certainly is. Now, Laura, I'm going to get you to move your microphone away from your chin just a tiny bit so that we don't hear too many of the plosive noises. Now, welcome everybody. If you're just joining us, we're here with the lovely Laura Overton and we're talking culture. Now, our conversation point today, Laura, is what is the real learning culture problem L&D are trying to solve. So start us off on this real problem.
Well, when we were discussing what the subject ought to be, we were talking about or all the big things that are hitting our industry at the moment. What's everyone talking about, every conference, what we were writing about? And to be honest, if it's not data and analytics, it seems to be learning and learning culture. So that's really the starting point of this. And I think when just talking to organizations, reading, listening to podcasts, it seems to me as though this is a big challenge at the moment because it seems to be that the industry is quite frustrated. You know, we are investing in new tools, new technologies, we're thinking about design, we're looking about experiences, we're trying to get people to connect and collaborate, and we're really frustrated and pulling out our hair. And I think a lot of people are starting to say, well, it's the culture of my organization. If only we had a learning culture. How do we get a learning culture in the organization to improve engagement? And I think that's really the starting point, because often I think as learning professionals, we potentially might be blaming the culture that we are in, saying it's the problem is our students, the problem is our workers, the problem is our line managers, the problem is our company culture. But I'm starting to think, is that the real problem, or should we start to be looking at the things that we need to influence ourselves? What's within our own grasp? And that's the thing that I'm really fascinated by at the moment, is not what are the problems with everybody else when it comes down to learning culture, but actually, are we contributing ourselves to that problem?
I'm intrigued. Are we contributing to the problem? That's a question we should probably ask ourselves more often, and we should definitely do that. I can think of a few areas where I can think about asking that. Jane Lockhart asks, how much culture? How much friction for people to engage? How much have we put in place? How much is just there systematically? Or systemically, that was the word. Laura, what are your thoughts on what Jack is posing?
I think it's a really good kind of reflection on, the real learning culture, because one of the things that I think that is the challenge is that we think that we need to put culture in place, and we can't do that. We are part of our organization's culture, but we're not necessarily there to drive and complete the learning culture. It's something that we need to maybe think about influencing. And so some organizations are really so lucky because their CEOs from the very top are saying we are an organization who wants to continue to change, who wants to continue to grow, continue to adapt. And in fact, I love the case studies that Nigel Payne has put in his new book about workplace learning culture. And in fact, if you Google it on YouTube, he gives a few summaries. People like WD-40, people like like Microsoft, and even 82. The smaller organizations, when the CEO is there saying we want to continually learn, we want to learn from failures, they are the sorts of cultures that systemically are influential, that we can hook onto. So I think when you're talking about how much we have to put in place, I kind of think that we need to start to look at our own current culture of our organization and work out how can we contribute to it in our own way in order to start to build and to influence. How do we leverage what's already in place? And I think those organizations who are perceived to have great learning cultures that Nigel was talking about, the learning function can hook on to that, and obviously that is a great place to start. I know not everyone can get there.
Sounding absolutely excellent there. Christine, hello Christine, she says, I think for L&D, learning is an end in and of itself. And for most other people, it might not be like that, or to the same extent. What are your thoughts on?
Oh, Christine, I can always rely on you on something provocative in the conversation. And I think for some learning and development professionals, when we're used to creating and responding to requirements within the business, we kind of think, yes, we've done our job, and the reason it hasn't taken off is everybody else's fault. And so I think I might agree with you there, Christine, that perhaps historically we've thought that what we contribute is a finite piece within the overall system. But what I don't think is that we've actually leveraged the opportunity that we have as learning professionals, particularly in this new world of work, to really start to say, okay, if someone takes part in an intervention that I have created, to what extent am I building that culture of learning in that individual? To what extent am I equipping them to go forward and actually do something different when they're back in the workplace, in terms of their reflection, in terms of their engagement? And I think that is a great opportunity for us, that I think we need to be leveraging more and more, rather than just leaving it to everybody else to create that learning culture.
And so what are some of the things that you've seen over, I was about to say many years of your career, and I didn't mean to sound that negatively, but in your great experience, Laura, what are some of the things that you've seen companies that are doing really well to leverage this, and the difference?
Well, I just have to mention, there's a couple of things I've mentioned, but over the weekend I was listening to Michelle Ockers and Karen Maloney's Learning Uncut podcast from Australia. Amazing case studies there. And I posted one on LinkedIn, which was for a big apparel retailer called Cotton On Group. It was an interview that they did with Beth Hall, who is the leader of the Cotton On Group University. And it was phenomenal, the types of things that she was doing to leverage the Cotton On Group's sort of culture of really getting people to own their careers, to own their contribution, and to own their own part in establishing the culture. Their group philosophy is, as an individual, everything that we do either contributes and makes a deposit into the company culture, or it makes a withdrawal. And that's something as a learning function. They hate to be called learning function, actually they call it performance that they're working on, that they really focus on from the point of someone in joining on an onboarding perspective. It's one of the what they call creds, one of the credentials right at the very beginning, a competency that they build in when people join the organization. And although they may not be as well known in the UK, this is a global organization of 20,000 team members. And right from the very beginning, this contribution of contributing to culture and contributing to the way that we do things around here is so important. And that in itself helps to build that learning culture. And I think the other second thing that I would suggest, and I'd like to kind of, if I may, refer back to the work of the amazing people that are running towards maturity at the moment. Over the 15 years, we were really looking into what builds a high-performing learning culture, and isn't just one thing. It's not just about engagement. It's not just about technology. It's about how we build shared responsibility, and there's a whole range of different things that we need to be thinking about at different stages of our maturity. The Towards Maturity health check that's I believe is still open at the moment allows us to stop and reflect, because where we are right now might not be a Cotton On group, it might not be a Microsoft. We might be in a situation which is completely different, and we're really frustrated. And I think that health check process helps us to start reflecting for ourselves as learning professionals. Well, what is it that we can do today in the environment that we're currently in that not only delivers today, but also builds a future for tomorrow as well? So I'm really excited to see the new developments in the Towards Maturity work since I've gone, and the new immediate feedback that they're giving to people through the health check process. So that's definitely worth having a go at. So one very specific example, and then a very broad example of the fact that we've got to perhaps examine all of our bases to work out what we can do today in order to deliver tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think you can't just do one thing. If it was one thing, it would be simple and everyone would do it. And we know how big a thorny topic this is. And you said something there which brings me back to something that Jack shared in chat, which I've just pasted in again. And Jack said, how would we describe our own learning culture professionally? If we're not driving our own, why should anyone else follow? And so the work that we do at Training Journal is with trainers. The work I do in my company is with trainers within the L&D industry. So Laura, what can we do ourselves individually, but also maybe as part of our team and also our personal learning network more widely, that can actually...
I think that is such a brilliant question that Jack's asked. And in fact, when I was working at doing some a web, actually it wasn't a webinar, it was a workshop with learning technologies, that's exactly what we looked at and say, okay, well, what can we do personally? And the number one piece of feedback that the whole group, was about 80 people, we were working on this together, was how do we start to create a learning culture within our own team? And that looks at personally as me as an individual within learning and development, but also just within our learning and development team. And I think if we look at what characterizes our own learning environment, it's very rare that we, or our own learning culture, it's very rare that we actually take our own medicine. It's very rare that we are curious. It's very rare that we look outside of our own sphere of knowledge in order to understand how somebody else might be tackling a similar problem. It's very rare that we stop and we reflect. It's rare that we actually take time to experiment. Everyone says in this new agile world, we need to experiment, iterate our different ideas, try them out. It's still rare that we actually do that. We talk about it. That's not rare at all. We talk about it all the time, but actually taking those things and living them ourselves, whether it's personally as an individual or whether it's within a learning and development team. So I think that is the first step that we can take, and we can be in control of that. We can start to get excited about our experiences as a result.
And I think that curiosity part is really important. It's something I know that I talk about a lot. And if we're not curious as human beings, then how can we do that necessarily in our role and start thinking beyond, is this the problem? And, you know, even with something like data that we've talked about a lot, and how you've inspired me to just ask those questions. And you don't have to be a spreadsheet nerd or a maths geek. It's just about, well, what's there and what can we investigate and look at a little bit more. Christine's adding in chat, it's the comfort zone thing, getting outside of your comfort zone, which we want everyone else to do all the time, as long as it's so good. Yeah, exactly. Not me. Yeah. I think my dad used to say, do as I say, not as I do, which I'm sure is not the greatest approach from this. So Laura, Jamie makes a really good point here. He says he's seeing a culture connection between a fixed mindset, such as the credential, well, I've got the degree, I've got the certificate, I'm okay, and the growth mindset. So Carol Dweck is the person who's famously done a lot of work on this, and there's been some more research on that recently that's come out. And so I think there's something here about, is it about credentials versus continuous learning? Is it about opportunity? Does it...
I absolutely agree with Jamie. It's about mindset, and in fact, I think at the beginning of 2017, this was my big thing at the time, and I'd written an article on LinkedIn around the growth mindset for learning and development professionals, because absolutely that is what we get, and I've seen it actually get more entrenched, perhaps a fixed mindset get more entrenched potentially over the last couple of years since we've been talking about this. And I think it's because there's so much change going on. There's so much happening. And it's almost like, well, where do we even start? Where do we even start? And then we go back to what has worked. And that, what has worked in the past, is something that we've perhaps learned to do through, we've got our professional certifications, we've been on our blended learning programs, we've done our CPD on how to run webinars, and that's worked. And that is, you know, we need to build our skills, and credentials help build our confidence. But when we get rooted in our own pride in that environment and are able to say, actually, what has changed? How do I adapt? How do I take what I know and apply it in a new environment? How do I work out why I have tripped up, and how do I leverage that to move on into the next environment? Then the growth mindset, it's very difficult for us to actually embrace that. And I think sometimes our expertise can hold us back. And it is in the last report I wrote for Towards Maturity, that was something that I felt very strongly about in the transformation journey. We talked a little bit about this concept of trained incapacity. And the more expert we are, the less able often we are to be able to identify what's going on around us that might mean that our expertise needs to be updated or modified or adapted.
Yeah, I see sometimes maybe it's to do with complacency, and I see that in myself too, that you get to a point where you think, well, I'm really good at this, and you almost just relax and ease off the gas, and then that's when some things can maybe work not so well. So I think there's an element of that in there. Going back to the credentials part, Debbie, who's our editor-in-chief, hello Debbie, she says, I'm not sure that organisations are interested in L&D's credentials, more about what they can help the business achieve, and actually probably wider. Does that count for...
Well, I think that's an excellent point that's made there. I think you're right. L&D professional qualifications, not very many line managers can say, oh, I don't want you working on my program unless, unless on my performance problem, unless you've got a particular credential. Absolutely, I agree with you there. But I do believe, Debbie, that as a learning profession, we need to be professional. And if an organization has a business and performance issue, that we can sit down and work with the organization to uncover that business problem, and then to uncover when and how and where we can apply our professional expertise to that situation as part of the solution. Even though the business may not demand that we know how to do that properly, and to be quite honest, we all know a lot of people in our business have got a good gift of the gab, haven't necessarily got experience, haven't necessarily got the ability to design and uncover the right solution to support a performance issue. And I think that's where we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes down to us being a professional, well well-versed group of individuals who can apply our unique expertise as part of the performance solving team. So I think there's a little bit of both, and I am nervous sometimes when we throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes down to credentials.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And there's some good conversation going on in the chat window about that. Christine's making a great point about when somebody might have been trained abroad and how that works as well. I want to bring us back to that starting point of our discussion today, which is what is the real learning culture problem L&D are trying to solve? Have we actually identified what that real problem is, Laura? And if we're trying to solve it, what are some of the ways that we can solve it? Can you give us some tips, some action?
Well, I think that one of the challenges is that we can't pin this down. It's Nigel Payne's regularly pointed out that we can't even pin down what learning culture is. In fact, I asked the question on LinkedIn this morning, what is a good learning culture? Because what it is for you may be different from somebody else. From somebody like a Microsoft, I think as Jack pointed out, who's embraced the growth mindset, a great learning culture will be part of the way that organization lives out its company culture. For organizations which are perhaps more traditional, much more hierarchical, much more nervous about creating sort of an environment for fail fast and fail often, fail fast and get up quick. That learning culture there might need to be different. It might need to be a stepping stone. It might be that how do we create a learning culture within our safe environments that we as learning professionals can actually deliver. And I think we've covered some of those different ideas. And I think we can look at modeling change. How do we model collaboration? How do we model building trust? How do we model it's okay to fall down as long as we learn and we reflect? And I think whether or not we're looking at the big organizational culture or we're looking at our personal culture or a culture within our L&D team or the culture we want to create within our own sphere of influence, those are the things that we need to be very practical about addressing.
Loving all of that, Laura. Thank you so much. We're not finished yet. We're not going away anywhere. But what we are going to do is move into a reflection piece. So we're coming off of webcam, but Laura is staying. We're still going to be discussing this. But we've had a great conversation so far. And I've got a box on the screen here. And I would just like to know from you, what is it you're going to do after today's session? What will you do maybe this afternoon, maybe tomorrow, something like that? Because this is all about actually moving forwards and actually taking those steps and those actions that are right for you and for your organisation. Now, in the main chat window, Debbie has said, look at Guy Bloom's article in June's edition on page 18 about L&D gaining influence. Thank you, Debbie, for highlighting that back on the June edition. So that will be available on the Training Journal website. And if you're not a subscriber, that will become available to you a little bit later on. So let us know in the chat window on the main kind of big part of the screen, what is it that you're going to be doing after today? And Laura, whilst people are having a think and typing there, what's something that you are taking away from this conversation?
For me, I love Jack's, I think it was Jack's comment about your personal learning culture. It's something that I'm really exploring at the moment. I've said to many people that I'm in a very much a liminal space, an in-between space after leading the Towards Maturity research for 15 years and really looking at what needs to be done next. And this has really resonated with me about how can we help each other to be the best that we can be in these environments. And I think that's one of the things that I'm definitely going to be taking away as part of my own thinking and my own investigations at the moment.
Laura, thank you for that. I think that's a really great point, and it's an eternal challenge to help each other and to support each other, but really a worthwhile one. And what have we got going on in our actions, what people will do now? Jack says, I'm going to describe what we've done to grow our personal learning culture in a team meeting. Thank you, Jack. Really good there to share and share that with the rest of your kind of company. Mel's talking about being more curious, which is absolutely brilliant. Christine's talking about doing things out loud more. I've got so much benefit from sharing my learning and my failures and that kind of thing. So I think that's absolutely brilliant, Christine. Yana says, become a role model in L&D and not give up. I'm nearly bashing the desk there, Yana. I'm really channeling your energy. Thank you so much for that. Christine adds, decluttering some of the practices and theories that I can retire, which is all about myth busting. And Christine, if you look on SoundCloud at Training Journal, we've got a whole L&D on trial section, which is all about that myth busting. So you can go and have a listen of those. And Jamie says, some more personal learning conversations and joining talks like today's one. Well, we have a few more, Jamie, and you are more than welcome to come and join us for those a little bit in the future. And Christine is saying just yes, which is absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. And if you want to get involved in more discussions, we've got a LinkedIn group as well, and I've shared that in the main chat. Laura, what are your last kind of comments on seeing what people are going to take away and do as part of this conversation today?
Well, I think that it's really exciting about owning the space. So that I think that is absolutely critical for us. But now it's about how do we prioritize what to do next. And I think that's one of the things that the kind of tools maturity health check process can actually help us to do. It helps us stop and reflect. It kind of combines our two things, data and culture, that we talked about right at the very beginning. You know, maybe taking just a little bit of moments just to stop and reflect. What am I doing now? What's working? What's not? And just the questions will help us to focus on what we need to prioritize individually as well. So just let's combine maybe a bit of data and that personal ownership to help us prioritize and kickstart that next phase of our journey.
Thank you, Laura. Well, it wouldn't be a conversation with you if we didn't mention data, but I think that's a really great point about combining those things. And there are always way more things that we want to do with our time than we can. So the idea of prioritizing, I think, is a really important note to finish on. Laura, thank you so much for being with us today. How was it?
Loved it. And I just loved the chat. Such an amazing audience that you always be able to attract here. So, Joe, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you, Laura. I've shared Laura's contact details. I'm sure she'd be more than happy for you to get in touch and have a conversation with her. And what we've got coming up online is our session from today. So you'll be able to share that with your colleagues if you want them to get involved in the conversation. Also, our next live video discussion, we've got the absolutely wonderful Mark Gilroy from TMS Development International, and he will be talking about the anti-energizer and just giving us some ideas for leading team events without those awful icebreakers, that enforced fun that we get. You can go and register for that now. So on behalf of Training Journal and Laura and myself and John and Debbie, thank you so much for coming along today. I hope you have a really great day and hope to see you soon. Bye bye.